Without any further delays, I'll turn it over to Mr. Reinhardt, who most of you already know is an engineer with ODA. So I think you're on the line, aren't you, Justin?
Yes.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, welcome everybody. We'll get started here. This is kind of turning into sort of a Justin and Justin in the morning type radio show or something. We're gonna, like Justin mentioned, we're gonna take a kind of a step backwards from the other ones and go through some basics here to setting up and starting off a simple drawing. So again, we're going to do this in at least all foreseeable classes into the future with Autodesk's AutoCAD Civil 3D 2016 version. Not looked at 2017 to see if there's much change, and most everything should still be the same in the recently earlier versions there. So this is our, once we get AutoCAD started up, Civil 3D, this is our basic window that we should be seeing here. And in it you'll see at the top a toolbar with various tools. If you click on these, they will bring you to various ribbons, and the ribbons down here are organized by various tasks. If I click on the bottom where there's an arrow, you'll see that the little panels, which are right here, this is the design panel, has even more tools under it. So there's a icon and tool up here for just about any drawing task that we would want to do. You'll see that these also may change. Ones may add or subtract up here at the top depending on what what part of the drawing you're working on. So this is the ribbons, and these are the panels here, and then each of them has a tab. Also over to the left you have our tool space, and to get that, if that's not showing, under the home tab in the palettes pane, you can click that on or off just by clicking on the tool space there. Tool space has 4 tabs, 2 of which are probably the ones you're going to use most often. The prospector, which if you're familiar with CAD is where a lot of the files for the various features that we create are going to be, the properties are going to be in these different folders here. So you're going to have alignments, surfaces, corridors, assemblies, points, everything in the prospector. Your settings tab has mostly style information, colors, line types, line weights, and such information based on a whole different library of different types of styles you could set up for an alignment, for different types of alignment, design check, and then the lines and curves and spirals. So they're very nested in the tool space. Settings tab. We'll talk a lot more about the settings tab and styles, I think, in a second class. Right now we want to just kind of cover some very basics to simple drawings. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is establish the drawing settings, and I do that by going up to the Applications button, which is in the upper left. The AutoCAD logo will be up here at Civil 3D. Honestly, I never knew that was called the application button until I had to look up, because I didn't know what to tell you guys to click on there. I just always called it the big A in the upper left. But if you click on that, this is where your basic Windows type commands, open, save, etc. are all located, along with the toolbar up here just to the right. And a couple of important things you have here are, number one, options. And if I click on this options tab, it will allow me to customize a lot of the settings to the user interface, how things save, auto save features, and those type of things. The other important thing I want to show you is the drawing utilities. There's a number of different utilities in here, including a recovery tool if you have your PC crash or the program close down on you. Purge and audit are 2 very useful repair tools. If you start to stumble or have problems with the drawing, first step is usually going to be to go to Purge and Audit to remove any glitches that might be in the drawing. And then if I go back up to the top, I can go to Drawing Settings. So let me click on Drawing Settings. I've got a number of different tabs, but the one it's probably most important here for our basic work is just the units and zone, and this is going to set up our two things. One, our scale, drawing units, and coordinate system for the drawing. Obviously we want to be in feet. You'll notice that you're provided with two options in feet: international feet and the US survey foot. Survey foot is microscopically smaller than the international foot. The international foot is the foot as we all know it, the foot that you learned in first grade and have used ever since. So we'll stick with the international foot. Survey foot was developed as obviously for geodetic surveying, and I can't tell you the whole history of it, but it is infinitesimally smaller than the other one. So for our purposes, it shouldn't matter. Okay, scale. I should really be doing all of our drawings to a 1:1, and I think you'll find this in the NRCS guidance on CAD work, that the drawings be done on a 1:1 scale. And that's a good time to mention here that there's a lot of different ways to do some of these things, and some of this may be a moot point if you're using a template provided by NRCS, or you're using your own created template. You may be able to set some of this stuff up, or it may already be set up for you and you don't have to go through it. But I want to at least show you where everything is and how this all works so that you have the background. There's also multiple ways to do a lot of different things in CAD. Just about everything has different ways to approach it. So we're showing you, and through all these classes, one way of doing it, the way we may be most comfortable with or most experienced in, but there's certainly other ways, and we definitely invite you to chime in if you have any better alternatives, because I'm certainly not an expert here, and I think if we can share these, I could just keep going back to tips and tricks, we can all kind of learn a little bit. Okay, so back to the scale. So I want to set that scale as 1:1 and do my drawing line work in 1:1. That makes it a lot easier to, when I go to print my drawings, to use the different scales that will be appropriate for our paper drawings. And I should also probably go ahead into the zone and set the datum. So if I go to my drop down box and work my way through the globe, I eventually get to good old state of Ohio and the US of A, and now I've got another whole slew of coordinate systems. You might be using a different one for some reason or another, but we'll stick with our NAD 83 state plane coordinate system in the south zone, US feet. Okay, and that'll pull up and should be similar to what you have in your surveying equipment or your GIS. Gives the description, the datum. Once I've got all those variables set, I'll just apply it, hit OK. Okay, and if I do that, set that datum, one cool thing is the Geolocation tab pops up. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of different tabs that are set that will be hidden, that will pop up when you start to do a specific task. If I start to draw an alignment, a toolbar will pop up that will direct me to all the various tools related to an alignment. So the Geolocation tool allows me to pull in various maps, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the map aerial, and of course I've got to be logged, I've got to be online to do this, so it's going to use the online map data service, which I believe you're going to need to make sure you have the Autodesk account set up to start that. Okay. And I'm guessing we are waiting for that to show up. Always fun to have glitches go when you're trying to do technical things. You have the map and a map hybrid. We'll see if maybe the map's going to call up today. I am signed in. Okay.
I think this is something I've run into before, is that if you don't have survey points or something in there that it can't have a geosynchronization to. I think I've had the same issue, that if you don't have something in there that it can pinpoint, that it doesn't pop up. So I don't know if you have survey points or something you can insert that. Typically it always pop-ups when you do that.
No, it's always just popped up generally for me before, whether I had any type of data in here. Anyhow, we'll just kind of carry on. What you should be looking at is an aerial photograph, and you can then, of course, you don't need the whole globe or the whole country to show, so I can then go ahead and let me just zoom out to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, no. You can go ahead into this capture area, which I just highlighted, and use that to basically just snip a portion of the aerial photograph out, and then I can capture that, clip all that out, and clip it to my area of interest there. So that's a geolocation tool. You can try that later. Maybe you'll have more success with it. It's just all it's doing is pulling in an aerial photograph. Makes it real simple to do. You do have to have that AutoCAD account there, I think, set up first. But all right, well, not bad. We're only 10 minutes in, and we've already got our first glitch, so everything should go smooth from here, I suppose. Okay. The other thing is that as we kind of navigate through some of the various tools here, there's tabs on the bottom, and these tabs, AutoCAD will default to 3 different tabs. So you have model and layout tabs. These layout tabs are usually referred to as paper or paper space, and as you can see from how they're laid out, they're showing you almost like a print preview version of what your actual paper drawing is going to look like. You can draw right in and on these tabs. A lot of people like to do that. Or you can do your drawing work, your line work, right in the model space area, and use viewports to piece the drawings together on your piece of paper. Okay. So let's see, we'll start. If you most of the basic drawing tools are going to be on the home tab under the drawing panel. You'll see here you can do your lines and circles and squares, and then we're going to start with just a basic rectangle. I'm going to locate it right here. Now, a lot of different, you can either just use your mouse the whole time. There's written commands to engage all of the different icons. If I hit D, it's going to allow me to type in dimensions, so I want specific dimensions for this rectangle, and we'll just do 10 by 10, and it's going to ask me where is that going to be, and you can't see it because I'm zoomed out here. Let's zoom in. Okay, and let's go to, now's a good time to show. If I ever lose things like this, usually view extents will zoom me to wherever my drawing is as it gets lost in the whole globe here of model space. You can use the window, go back to the previous view, etc. to navigate. But if you ever get lost in space, the easiest thing to do is go right back to that view extents, and that'll zoom you in and show you where you're at. Now, if you hit view extents, you know there's things there and you can't see them. Chances are you have somewhere a survey point or a line or a feature of some sort drawn miles away from the rest of your drawing, and your drawing is actually just little tiny dots showing up on your screen. So that's one thing that you can kind of clue in if you're having issues, is to just zoom to extent. So here's my, in model space, my rectangle, okay, and it's 10 by 10. So if I go to my paper space now, and I want to have that drawing show up on my paper, I'm going to need to create a view into that model space as a viewport. The viewport tab automatically pops up here when I move over to the layout. I've got a couple different options for types of viewports. I'll just draw in a rectangular one right here, and there is my rectangle. I can go into that viewport. Down at the bottom tab toolbar here, I have a button that will allow me to enter that viewport in model space. You'll see it says model down here, and if I go into it, now I'm working within this highlighted viewport. It's in bold, and I can readjust my drawing, move it around, and when I got it where I want it, I can lock it back in place and go back to paper space. And I should have, if I do this right, these viewports, this line here set up so that it does not print. And when you print your drawing, all you'll have is your rectangle drawing shown here on the piece of paper. If I want to get this to a certain scale, I can click back on my viewport and enter a specific scale. So I want this to be drawn as 1:20 scale. Now my drawing is scaled here as a 1:20 scale drawing, which is how we probably want to do a lot of our drawings to scale. Okay. Now let's go back here to our drawing that we did for the rectangle. If I go to the Home tab again, we had the drawing tools I mentioned. We also have modify tools, and the modify tools are going to allow you to do a lot of the editing and customizing to all your different line work. You'll also have, if under the Annotation tab, where we can do our text work and dimensioning work. So in this case, I've got my rectangle. Let's go ahead and add some dimensions. I can add different types of dimensions, be it aligned, linear, angular. We'll do the linear dimension here from end to end, and okay, that'll show us as 10 foot, and we'll do this one as 10 feet as well. Okay, so now I have two dimensions, and if I go back to my paper space, oh, I'm still stuck on something there. I can see my drawing and my dimensions are there, and I'm at 1:20 scale. That's kind of a problem. Not going to look too good on paper. I could do a couple different things. I could zoom that up to, whoops, I'd zoom that down, wouldn't certainly help, would it? Zooming up to 1:10, a little bit more viewable. I still really can't see my text. Okay, so if I go back into the model space and look at these dimensions I drew, I'm going to right click on them and go to the Properties tab. And when I right click on any feature, it'll pull up the Properties tab, and this is where you can do a lot of the editing to get to various styles, different line types, different make sure your layer is right, move your layers. You can get to all the different elements that are established to that that feature. So I can change the arrows and so forth. I can change the sizes. But what I did with this is I drew this as a standard dimension, okay, and it is not annotative. If I Okay, if I go back to my dimensions here, and you'll see the tab drop down here has two options. I drew that and left that as standard. If I come over and draw this as an annotative dimension, okay, it's going to ask me the scale to which it is displayed. We're going to leave that as 1:1 for now. Okay, put two more dimensions on this box here. Okay, and you see these look right now the same as they show here from the previous two that I drew, which were standard. And if I come over here, they're not in my viewport. So what happened? Well, one of the beauties of using the annotative text and dimensions is it allows for two things. One, it allows the scale to be more viewable in the viewports, and the reason it wasn't showing up is because I did not set the annotative scale. If I go back to my viewport, I set my viewport, as you remember, as 1 inch to 10 feet. Okay, and if I go back and click on these, and I'm going to just show you it in the properties window, it has the annotative scale is only listed as 1:1. I'm going to open up the annotative scale. Okay, and it's going to be giving me a toolbox here where I can add additional scales. If I add the 1 to 10 in there, hit OK, and go back to my paper or layout tab. Now my dimensions are shown in the 1 to 10 scale. You'll see that they're quite a bit bigger than the other ones because the other dimensions I drew were are attributed to or sized to the model space, and now these are sized to the annotative or the scale of the viewport. And if I click on them, you'll see what it looks like in the viewport itself. Okay, so one nice thing you can do is if you want to hide dimensions, you can set them, remove a scale for a viewport. So if for some reason I didn't want those two 10-foot dimensions to show, if I go back to my 1 to 20, they're gone again. So if I have a drawing that I'm showing in multiple locations and I want the labels to show in one window or one viewport but not another, one trick to do that is simply to make sure that they're at a different scale and that text or those dimensions or labels are annotative. Okay. Okay, any questions on anything so far? Kind of going through a lot of things. I feel kind of fast, but that's a little bit of the scale, the drawing scales, viewports, model space, paper space. We can also go ahead and, if I go back to my model tab, let's go ahead and well, let's pick one. Let's go ahead and delete this dimension here. And go ahead and draw a couple of lines. And you can see that I can either program these in to a specific distance, let's say 5 feet. This line here, I want it to be perfectly straight, but it doesn't look like I got it real straight there. And if I want to go draw straight perpendicular lines, I can turn on down again on the lower right my orthogonal drawing tool, and I can draw that line in and have it be perfectly straight up and down 90-degree angles very easily. Okay, so I can kind of delete that out of there. Let's see if I right click, and I'm a mouse clicker, but I can move that whole drawing to either in the same vein using the orthogonal tool, move it straight down a little bit here. All right, a couple other things I could possibly do is using the modify tool. Two of them that come in handy are the trim and extend tool. If I use the trim tool and I want to get rid of this part that I drew that goes into the box, I can click on my box and that becomes the line with which the other line will be cut. Click enter, and I'm going to trim this piece off right here, and it's going to show you it went in light gray, so I don't need that. Let's cut that. And then let's take the other one and do an extend. Same concept. Just going to click on the box, hit enter, and it's going to show me how I could extend that line. Okay, there you go. So I made a little chute off of my box there. Now let's take a look at this and see if we can go back into the properties, talk a little bit about line types. I can choose a different line type besides the continuous or just the normal line. I could do a dashed line of sorts here if I wanted to make this some sort of hidden object or proposed or differentiate it from the other box. I could do it as a dashed line. I can also change the weight of the line here, maybe go up to a little bit thicker pen type. Close that down. Now you didn't see anything change there you did with the line type, but not with the line weight. If I go down and click on my display line weights button here, it'll show the print version of the line weight. So that's could be cluttering to your drawing and you want to leave that off while you're doing your work, or maybe you want to see how it's really going to look on paper and turn it on. So that's where that button is located. Okay, and if I go back and look at this in my paper drawing in my viewport, oh Nelly, the dashed line doesn't quite look like what it was supposed to. And again, that's because I'm drawing it at a certain scale, and then my viewport is scaling everything up. And I've set the drawing to do the hatching according to whatever my model space is. So one way you could get around that is to simply right click on my properties and go to my line type scale and change that. Let's put a half in there, close down, move around, and that made it a little better. That ends up being a cat and mouse game to me, where you go back and forth trying to get these right, and you'll eventually get to a point where if I go back to properties, change this to, select it there, change this to 0.1, and you'll end up with situations where the line looks solid here, and if I go to my drawing, it's dashed just like I wanted it. I'm going to go back one more time and change this back to 0.5. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my paper space like I wanted it. And like I said, it's pulling that scale from your model type. So if I type in, anytime you start to type in a command, it'll pull that text right up there. Paper space, line, type, scale. Right, there's that command. It's and change that to, it's set to 1. That means it's taking whether it's taking the scale from the paper space or the model space. And again, I'm not an expert. I thought that getting that to, oh, I know what I didn't do. It didn't refresh. Let's do it one more time. Paper space. Set that back to 1. Your options is binary, 1 or 0. 0 means no, 1 means yes. Nothing changed. So if I go back to my model, click off it, click back on it, and it didn't change again. So let's change that back to 0. Okay, now it went back. There we go. So now I turned it off of the paper space scaling, and now it's drawing the scale that was indicated for the model space, or 1-to-1. So now you have your dashed line drawn at a 1-to-1, and it's going to view in the viewport the exact same as how you drew it. The problem with that will be that if I come into my viewport here and scale that at all, it's not going to scale. That dashed line is not going to scale, and you're going to kind of lose it at some point. So not telling you how or what to do, but that is an option for kind of playing around with getting those line types scaled right. Okay. All right, any questions on kind of line types? Another tool we can run through here on the drawing is the snap tool. So if I click down on my lower right, the snap tool basically takes my cursor drawing points to any number of features on a line or on my drawing, the end point of a line, midpoint, center point, various nodes, intersections. So I can turn that on or off to do drawings down here at the toolbar in the lower right. If I have a line that's going to continue right off that vertex, I either have to zoom in and kind of guesstimate it, or I can turn my snap on, make sure it's set to endpoint, and you'll see that green box appear knowing I've locked on. I'm in ortho mode, so let's take that off. I've locked on to that corner, and then it'll find maybe my next corner here, and I can click off that. Now I've got a line drawn that snap to those corners. It's very important if you're going to do hatching, because if you don't snap to those intersections and lines, there may be a little gap there that will make hatching very difficult. And hatching is just going to be filling that with some sort of shape or pattern. So if I go to my draw tool, I've got a hatch command. I can click on that and it's going to open up a toolbar here for hatching. I've got a lot of different patterns that are preset into CAD. I could do a gravel pattern, and I can either select entire objects here to the right, or I can pick internal points. I like to just pick the internal point, and if I do that, you'll see that gravel gets hatching gets put right into that polygon I drew between the vertexes, even though these are two different lines that filled that whole space with the gravel. And this is also done to scale, so I can change the scale of that. If I don't like that gravel hatch, I can make it smaller. You start to see the pattern show up, and that doesn't look too good. I can also go higher, fill it in if I'm using riprap and not 57s to make it look a little bit more appropriate. I can move those, and those will also then show up in our viewport. Click back on our viewport and get us back to 1-to-10 scale. Okay, so I have my gravel there. I'm going to probably need to do some back and forth changing with my hatching to get that to look right. And I can make that annotative as well. So if I make that annotative and go back to my viewport, my hatching is gone. Same reason, because I didn't establish a annotative scale to that hatching. Go back into my properties, same way, come in here, click in here, add my 1 to 10 scale. And my hatching shows. Again, now my scale is 1 to 10. It was drawn at 1 to 1, so I'm going to have to come in here and change my scale and have it start to zoom in a little bit more like I want it. We'll go back down to 0.1. And what you end up having is a lot of situations like that with your scales are really high where the hatching will be solid or not show, and but show up right in the viewports there. Okay, so that's hatching. Let's see, what other kind of tools do we maybe want to show? Kind of getting to the end of my list of things to run through with you. The only thing I sort of skipped over was a little bit on text size. If I go back in here, model space, to my annotative dimension I drew and my properties, you see I set a text size here as 0.18. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the arrow size. If I go to my text tab, I've got a text set to 0.18 font. So if I go to the paper space, let's kind of check on that and do a dimension here. Turn off my snap. You'll see it's drawing that as 0.18 inches. Okay, so the annotative keeps that scale or that font size to the size of the viewport in the paper space. Okay, so I can easily go and change that. If I didn't like 0.18, I want to go to something a little smaller for some reason. Just go into my properties and change my text to 0.14, make it a little bit smaller, and you'll see that I come into here and I'm a little bit smaller. I should be down to 0.14 size font. Okay, so that's how the annotative scaling works. It allows you to make sure that your fonts and features such as your arrows will be to the size you indicate in the properties in your viewports and on your paper, not get scaled with the scale of your viewport, 120, 110, 150, to the point at which things become unrecognizable here. So that's the annotation. You can do the same with, under the annotative tab, leaders and labels. I can draw directly on paper space, as was mentioned, and do a leader. And it'll draw in to label any features that we want to specifically call out. The problem with doing that is if I decide I need to do more drawing work, I'm going to take this whole viewport and shift it over to this page. My drawing items are separate from that viewport, both the dimension and the leader that I drew. So I have to make sure I move those along with it. Same thing with if I decide that 1 to 10 isn't going to work, I need to make that a little smaller and go to 1 to 30 scale. Okay, that's getting close to about the end of some of the basic things I wanted to talk about. Any questions?
There was one question that was early on about the Geomap, and you weren't able to get it to work, but I did pull up my AutoCAD, and it does work, so I don't know, do you want to flip it over to me and I can show it in process?
When I got this set up yesterday, I saw a little thing that said something about logging it at 360, and that might have been part of the problem because it's not pulling up when I go back in here. It's indicating it's working, but it's not showing anything.
Yeah, I've gotten this a few times. Sometimes it just happens. And
okay. You have it ready? I can.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll switch it right over to you.
Okay. Can you see my screen now? Can you see it, Justin?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. So this is just where he was at. Up here in the ribbon, we have the Geolocation tab. I'm just going to select the aerial image, and you can see it pop right up. And this is from Bing, so it's probably a 2011 or 12 or 13 image, sometime around there. It just depends on what area you're in. These are nice because you can go anywhere if you have it geolocated, and you can find the image and pull it up that fast. All you have to have is the internet connection and signed into Autodesk 360. The problem is I can't print this in the plans as it is now. I have to clip it out, as he was saying earlier. So I went ahead and did that, and I'll just turn that on because I put that on a separate layer. Okay, let me turn off my my geolocation. So that's my clip layer. That can now print with any plans that I have. Now the question earlier was, can this be saved to the drawing and be used, say on someone else's desktop, AutoCAD function, can it be used without the internet connection? And I believe the answer is yes, but you cannot manipulate this at all. So if I go ahead and turn this layer off so that you can't see the image, and if I sign out of my Autodesk 360 up here, let's just sign out, I should not be able to turn on the aerial image now. Okay, right? It doesn't pop up because I'm not signed in to a 360. But if I go turn my aerial image back on layer, that still pops up the portion that I clipped out of the underlying Bing image. But I cannot move this. See, stuff happens. It just disappears when I try to move it. Okay, so it's not geolocated anymore. It's just it has that, or sorry, I didn't say that right. It is geolocated, but you can't move it to any other coordinate systems because it can't pull in that information from the internet because you're not connected to it through 360. So if you do this ahead of time and you clip out the right area, you should be able to use it on any other application if you don't have an internet connection, or you could should be able to send to someone else that doesn't have 360, and it should still work. That being said, you cannot further manipulate this drawing. So for instance, if this was a big aerial image, it gets kind of sort of less detailed the further in I go, and I can't adjust that anymore because I'm no longer connected to 360. So that's different things to think about. If your office has already a geospatial file for their county image that they got from OSIP or wherever, maybe that's better to use if it doesn't bog down your system too much as far as speed is concerned. But this is still a pretty handy tool to do projects pretty quickly. So I hope that I explained that good. I'll go ahead and sign back in, and it should pop back up again. Whoop, I get the... Okay, let's see here. There, it It just popped in again. So it's as simple as that. Do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that helps. Yeah, it's a lot easy, a lot better to talk about it when you can actually see it. It'll that much like Google Earth, that image
I can zoom out, and it'll should pull up the rest of the image. I could go all the way out to the county. I think I can even go to the state level. But the further out you go, the less detailed it gets.
It will I'm not sure what the word is, redraw, refresh to regenerate to
right.
The resolution as you scale in or out. So whatever you lock it as, that's what you're going to get. So you want to get as close in as you can when you clip that and lock in your view, so that if you do it from out, you're going to have a very coarse resolution, and it might not look good if you start to print little detailed drawings with the aerial in the background, like he just showed.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have
we
have another question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Calling on the phone?
Yeah, someone's calling on the phone. Okay, are there any benefits to being logged into the Autodesk 360 if you're currently not part of it? As far as I know, it's not a subscription. It comes with your AutoCAD subscription updates, right?
Yes. I don't know all of the, I haven't dug into some of the larger benefits. You do have the cloud space that you can store things on, and that's the only one I know of, is that the Geolocation. Very similar to the GIS, where they have the base, ArcGIS has the base maps available, and a lot of that other layers and things that they're starting to share as things become cloud-based. I haven't gotten too far into the 360 beyond that. Before we go, there's one other concept I wanted to introduce, and you reminded me of that when you mentioned it, which was layers. And we'll talk a lot more about styles and so forth in the next class. But when I draw anything, as far as basic line work, I don't know how I got on that, but I should be doing that on my zero layer. The zero layer must be in every drawing. You'll see that AutoCAD here, if I close that down, pull up my menu, we'll have a whole laundry list of different layers, and those layers can be turned on or off. It's very important that you use them when you don't change the defaults. When you change the defaults to any of your drawing work, as far as profiles, cross sections, alignments, corridors, and that type of thing goes, at pipe networks, things can get haywire because it'll be looking for items in a specific layer. But your basic line work, like we're doing, just lines and hatching and labels and text, generally all goes into a zero. And one of the things the layers allow you to do is establish all of the work, line work on that layer be of a certain, essentially, style, color, line type, line weight, transparency, etc. So the default, again, would be just doing a white or on paper black line, straight continuous line at a default line weight. I can go ahead, and if for some reason I need to want to create another one, I could create a different layer and establish a different line type with that, or different styles. I could maybe make one that says all my existing buildings, I want to do those as a dashed line. And again, there's prescribed NRCS line types, colors, and weights for various features that we should be adhering to. But just to show you how it works, I set up another line type there with a dashed line. Okay, so that way now if I come in here and I change my current line type to 0 and I draw another box, it'll default right to that hatched line every time, whether I draw a circle or square. And then if I go back to 0 and do the same thing, and it's back to my continuous line. And if I decide on a view, for some reason I don't want to show those existing buildings, I can just turn that off and do work. I can also freeze and do some other things that we'll talk about, I think, in the next session on some of this basic line work. Okay, we're getting close to 10:30, so we'll leave a little bit of time for any questions and let everybody enjoy their Friday.